What is up, guys? Phaedo 82 coming at you with some raid cam footage from the vanilla US Rustopia server. What you're taking a look at is unscripted vanilla raid footage, and the YPB and LQM clan are attempting to raid this base of some players who are currently offline. They are trying to use the momentum of the raid to their advantage and get through that base quickly. When you're raiding, you always want to have that momentum going and keep pushing forward. As you can see, they're using rockets to open up pathways into that base to get in there as quick as possible. As we've seen in Rust, rockets have become quite the effective raiding tool, and they're used just as much, if not more, than C4 during the majority of raids. You guys want to take note here that YPB is not wasting any time. When you're raiding, you don't want to stand around thinking too much about what you're doing. And they've judiciously used some smoke rockets, which are still a work in progress in the game. But the smoke rockets have been used wisely to be placed on those perimeter flank bases, so if the defenders do by chance wake up, they're not going to be able to really get a good accurate read of the raiders or be able to defend too well, because those flank bases would pose a problem for the raiders. So taking a look at the eye in the sky here, we can really see the effect that those smoke rockets have. The smoke does tend to linger, but it's highly effective. There's some gunfire going off up in the hills, so people are aware that this base is being raided. This is peak time on the Rustopia server, so chances are you're going to see some action here. You'll notice the use of ladders there, that YPB is making their way up the base fairly quickly. They're already up on the top floor. Ladders help to get through these bases in a much quicker fashion and add some verticality to it so you can get up there quicker. The defenders are still sleeping at this point in time. YPB and LQM are making short work of those sleeping bags, which is always something you want to do in raids, because sleeping bags are respawn points if you're not aware. And taking a look at what's going on here, there is some fighting going on outside. It looks like things haven't heated up too much yet, but all that gunfire, all that noise is certainly going to attract some other groups who are going to be coming in. Right now, there's just a few players up in the hills taking pot shots back down at the raiders. The raiders are doing what is probably the wisest decision at this point. They're pushing through the base, trying to get to those loot rooms, open that base up, and get out of there as quick as possible. They're aware that the element of surprise has been lost, so it's really a good thing that they're pushing through it as quick as possible. They are despawning the loot that they don't want to take with them, which is a typical tactic. Some people think it's a move that's a bit grimy, but it's kind of par for the course with most people who raid in Rust, especially if you're raiding somebody you have a vendetta with. Taking a look at the snowy mountains up here, we can see another group is taking note of what's going on down here. So the base defenders have woken up. YPB has used some incendiary rockets to help suppress those defenders, to help mitigate the ability they have to defend the base, and we can see the fire starting there. There is some action going on with one of the additional flank towers as well here. It looks like the defenders, even though there's smoke up in that flank tower, are trying to defend it as best they can. YPB's inside using C4 to keep pushing through that base, keep it going. They are trying to keep those defenders at bay, and they also have to worry about what's going on outside, because the hills do have eyes in this case, and they are coming down onto this raiding group. And YPB continues to push through the base while the defenders have woken up. They are starting to see if they can help mitigate this raid, but it's not going to really be in their favor. LQM and YPB are making short work of those sleeping bags, gaining access to those loot rooms. At this point in time, the defenders are taking, again, advantage of those flank bases. Even though they're covered in smoke, they are firing back out at the raiders, trying to suppress them as best they can. And we don't see too often, guys, in raids on vanilla server, the smoke rockets and the incendiary rockets, so it's nice to see that. You see it a lot in modded servers, but players don't often invest the resources into those. But they're being used effectively in this raid, and it's really nice to see that stuff happening. And what you're taking a look at here, guys, is a small fire team that's come in. This is consisting of Pharaoh. He has a small group of men. I believe it's about 3 or 4 men, and they are very effective at using their weapons. So Pharaoh and his team are moving into place. They've caught the fact that something's going on here. They've heard the noise, and they're moving into place, and they're giving YPB a run for their money. Anybody who plays in Rustopia knows that Pharaoh's a formidable opponent. He's good with his weapon, and his team is small but highly effective. And now, guys, things are heating up here at this raid. This compound is now the source of lots of gunfire that's going on, lots of small arms fires going on down here. We have fires lighting up here from those incendiary rockets, and you can see some rockets going back out towards Pharaoh and his crew. At this point in time, YPB is in this base, and they're actually using this base as sort of their point of defense. So oddly enough, they're defending from the base that they're raiding. Also inside, there are a few defenders who have woken up, but their main threat out here right now is Pharaoh and his team of men. You'll notice here that Pharaoh did put down some sleeping bags. Those are going to be respawn points for him. They didn't have time to build a staging base because they weren't aware that the raid was going on. So by throwing down a sleeping bag, what they can do is get back into the fight pretty quickly. One of the home defenders up here did fire a rocket back down, taking out a couple LQM and YPB members. So with those sleeping bags, getting back to that, the point of that is you respawn as quickly as possible. You go ahead, you get back in the fight. Lots of bodies in a battle like this, lots of corpses lining the ground. You can go ahead and grab the armor, grab an AK, a bolt, whatever is on the body, and rejoin the fight as best you can. It's absolutely chaotic right here. Rust is not a game where it lights up your opponents with a certain color or your teammates in a certain color, so you can really use sort of the chaos of this to your advantage, and even a small team like Pharaoh's can be highly damaging to a large group. Now, YPB and LQM, they have a lot of players here at this raid, which can sometimes be problematic. It's very difficult to communicate. Hopefully they're in two separate team speaks. I'm assuming that they are, because from time to time I do hear them communicating in voice chat. It would be very difficult to have everybody in the same team speak. If that were the case, you would need to separate them into two different fire teams just to have them move in and be effective. YPB and LQM are still holding the inside of this base down. Again, they're defending from the base they were raiding. The defenders inside are, again, waking up and trying to see what supplies they have left to be able to join the fight. And this is really the bottleneck right here. It was the point of entry that they blew into the base, and this is where all the action's occurring. You'll notice that Pharaoh changes clothes here. He actually dressed up like the raid team, and he did just fall in battle, but he will be back joining the fight soon. And that's a smart tactic to use because, again, in all the chaos, it's very difficult to differentiate who's who. It's gotten a lot better, guys, as you can see now in Rust with all the different skins that have been added into the game. But even so, in a chaotic raid like this, if you put on the right clothes and you mix in, you can actually cause the raiders to shoot themselves, and it's just a very chaotic scene down here on the ground. Lots of carnage going on, lots of bodies piling up. This is the stuff we like to see in raid cams. Always good stuff. So what was an offline raid turned into a very active raid. There's fighting going on the inside of the base. Bodies are piling up in there. There's also fighting going on outside. It's turning into really some killing fields outside around the base. And this is good stuff. And LQM continues to take out those respawn points for the defenders, hoping to take this base over and use it as their best option to defend at this point in time. So what they have to really think about now, guys, is what they were able to get for loot. And they did build a staging base, a raid base, so they need to ferry that loot back, get it back up to that staging base, put it in there so that they can focus on the fight. They don't want to lose the loot that they've had, but it's very difficult and a very risky proposition to go ahead and leave the base. There's no secret that this base is being raided now, and Pharaoh and his group are locking it down. It's amazing what 3 guys here are able to do to a large raid team. And Pharaoh and his men have rejoined the fight. They're continuing to use the quarries here and the rocks to their advantage, use that natural formation of landscape and the buildings to their advantage, which is always a smart move. LQM and YPB are holding strong inside that base, moving out when necessary to engage the raiders who are now essentially raiding them, if you want to think of it that way. They are essentially becoming the ones who are being raided at this point in time. Now, there's been some action, some explosions going on up here on the hill. We're now going up to YPB and LQM's staging base, which is now under attack by the Ewok clan and some of Dirt McGirt's crew. The Ewoks and Dirt McGirt's crew have come down and they've blown a hole in the side of the staging base, or the raid base, which, as we've talked about in previous raid cams, these are small bases that are built by the raid team so that they can have supplies to rejoin the fight when they need to, and also places to put the loot in while they're still raiding the base. This is a bit of a game changer here when this happens. When a staging base goes down, this means the respawn points for the raiders are going to be taken out. And as you can see, the LQM and YPB clans are divided at this point in time. There's still quite a number of them down at the base they were raiding, and there's a core group up here who's trying to defend their position at the raid base up here. What's housed in the raid base are very high-end supplies, rocket launchers, C4, guns, armor, things of that nature. So this is a place that they really have to think about defending. And not only that, it's also the place where they're going to respawn at. So they're doing well. YPB and LQM is doing a great job of holding their position as best they can. They're not rushing out. They're trying to use those choke points. And going back down to the main base, we can see again down here that those smoke rockets are still in effect. Again, it's a work in progress. In the future, I imagine that smoke will dissipate. But the base itself is still a source of carnage down here. Because that raid base is under attack at this point in time, the members who are down here and respawning are actually looting the corpses to be able to join the fight. And they're going to have to go up and probably take the fight back to where that raid base was. That appears to be where the action is moving towards. Pharaoh and his crew continue to push forward here in an attempt to get what they can out of the raid. They can actually take advantage of this chaos at this point in time, and they can let the members go back up to defend that raid base while they go in here and pick up the supplies. Not only were the loot rooms opened up here in the base, but there's a lot of supplies to be taken off the bodies. In a raid like this, guys, you're going to have things on those bodies like rockets, C4, of course, guns and armor and ammunition, and all that stuff's really important. So to think of the raid itself as being the most lucrative aspect is true, but also those bodies are highly valuable. So taking a look back up here at the staging base, lots of gunfire going on here. YPB and LQM are still doing a great job of locking it down. Looking at that shot right there, guys, that is an example of one of the loot rooms inside a staging base. Highly valuable area. Outside that staging base, lots of gunfire going off on the rocks. Again, this is the Ewok and Dirt McGirt crew who are allied. They're coming in and they're giving one heck of a fight to the YPB and LQM clans who are up at that staging base. And what's happening now is the remaining LQM members and YPB members who are down at that main base that they were raiding are now coming back up to join the fight up here. The fight has been taken to the hills, and they are trying to flank Dirt, McGirt, and the Ewok clan here, and to see if they can't salvage the supplies in that raiding base. But that is a little bit risky as well. Hopefully they're having some people break away and bring some loot back to the main base. Because all this chaos is going on, it would be wise to use that as a distraction to get some of that hard-earned loot that was taken from that base they raided back to their main base. But they also have to think about defending what they've potentially lost, so they have to make sure they get to that staging base and salvage whatever they can, because again, that staging base is absolutely critical. So here, guys, we're taking a sky in the eye view. We're taking a look at all of the gunfire going off here. During a raid camp of this magnitude where it's not limited to one structure, we have to kind of remain high in the sky just to get a sense of what's going on. If it's confusing, what you're seeing here, again, is gunfire, muzzle flashes that are lighting up as night sets in. And this is the Ewok and Dirt McGirt clan, and they're fighting against YPB and LQM. In the background here, we can see the globe, and then we can see down where that raid base was, or that base that was being raided, rather, was. And that is something that is an interesting perspective, how quickly the tables turned here. And at this point, LQM and YPB are on the retreat, and in hot pursuit, we have the Ewok clan and some members from Dirt McGirt's crew. They are pushing forward, and the raiders at this point are retreating under heavy fire. And take note here, guys, just the natural landscape and how you can use that to your advantage. The rocks are very effective choke points, and it's really a good way to be able to ambush raiders, ambush the defenders here. And there's a small base up here. Two guys who were working hard on a base here, and this is the most action they've probably seen in a long time. And they're trying their best to join the fight, but really at this point in time they don't want to poke the bear, and it's probably good for them just to stick to their base. They can wander out later and probably get a lot of supplies off the bodies that are going to be littering the landscape here. There's bodies all over the place. There's bodies up here in the hills, there's bodies down there by the main base. There's a ton of gear, a ton of loot just to be found on the ground here. So when big raids are occurring like this on a large server, guys, you can actually make quite a living off being a scavenger. So if you're a solo player or a small group and a big raid's going on, stick to the hills and try to go down there and scavenge as best you can. As you'll notice here, guys, night is setting in. We're taking one final look at the base that was being raided down there. Things are pretty quiet down here. There's still some gunfire going off, still some small arms fire happening, but the main fight is now taken up to the hills in the forest, and that's really where the focus is now. So while we end this raid camp, guys, just want to take a moment to talk about strategy, to talk about things that were done right, things that were could have maybe been done differently. And it's very difficult, you know, with large groups like this. But YPB, I think, did best practices in that they were pushing through that base as quickly as possible, trying to gain access to those loot rooms, get in and out as quick as possible. Once that staging or raid base was hit by the Ewok group, it's very difficult at that point to recover. So this was just a very interesting raid cam, guys. It looked like almost the whole server showed up, and as we can see, night has set in, and at this point in time, it's just a game of cat and mouse where the raid team is hiding and the intruders are coming in hot pursuit looking for those stragglers.